Let's be consistent.
Welcome to the Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and on today's episode, we are going to be exploring the relationship between consistency and forgiveness and how these two have such a profound relationship. Ultimately, I'm not going to pretend with you guys. We all know forgiveness is very hard. It is not easy, especially when you feel like you've been wronged or you've done nothing wrong. You know, we all hear these cliche sayings like forgiveness is for you, not for the other person. And I'm here to tell you that it is very true. We will dive today into how forgiveness can truly bring inner peace. What is the essence of forgiveness and really why some of us have struggled really with forgiving people. And I am raising my hand on that one as well, guys. It has been a struggle for me to learn the art of forgiveness because it really is an art to be able to forgive people, especially when you think that you are the one in the wrong and they owe you an apology. So hopefully as we dive into today's topic, you guys will learn something about the art of forgiveness, about how you can become a lot more consistent with your forgiveness in your day-to-day life. So the first thing I want to dive into is that forgiveness within and of itself is something that we need to look at by itself, meaning what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is truly an act that allows us as humans to let go of resentment, to heal those emotional wounds, and to restore inner peace. Those items that we just listed are really the key as to why we want to forgive, why we want to make forgiveness a culture. When we think about restoring inner peace, I'm going to give you guys a very simple example, but something that I know most of us can relate to. So currently, my mother is staying with me for the summer and she's here. So she's helping out around the house. And so I noticed that, she changed the trash bag out, but she left an empty trash container underneath the sink. So the next week when I go to take the trash out and put another trash bag into the trash container, there are no more trash bags, right? But because the box was down there, I was just under the impression that, okay, there has to be something here because we wouldn't leave an empty box just underneath the sink. Right. And so instantaneously, I was heated. And why was I heated? Because now I have to use Walmart bags because this was during a weekday and I have to, of course, work. So now I have to either go the entire day with having, breakfast, lunch, snacks, etc. and having to leverage small Walmart bags to put my trash in, or I'd have to leave home on my lunch break to go get them, or I'd have to go after work to go get them. And, just all these different things were coming into my mind and immediately caused me to be angry, right? And this is a very, very simple example, but hopefully something that you guys can relate to when you're in your home and something is out of place or someone moved something or didn't put something back and we find ourselves being triggered or being angry by an act that a person performed or did not perform. Right. And so I do want to go back to something that I said, and I'm not sure if you guys caught it, but it was really a revelation for me just as I was expressing this to you guys, is that what fueled my anger was my expectation that me and my mom are adults and we wouldn't leave an empty container underneath the kitchen sink if nothing was in there. Right. One, my anger is a source of my expectation, right? I am expecting that if the box is there, trash bags are in the box, right? You can say that's the logical expectation because the box is there. Or I could certainly argue in favor of my mom to say, well, if, she's just sticking her arm underneath there and she's just pulling something out, she may not have, actually looked at the trash bag container to see that nothing else was in there. She might have just pulled it out out and just close the cabinet and put that trash bag in the trash container, right? There's so many different ways that you can look at that. But in thinking about it, my anger towards her came from my expectation was that you, irrespective of how you got the trash bag, you would look at what you were doing enough to be able to say, this is empty. I should either one, tell Rakia, hey, we need more trash bags, or I would at least at minimum remove the empty box, right? And so hopefully that simple scenario allows you guys to see that anger can really come from expectations that we have when we think that someone should do something a particular way, or if someone does not do something the way we expect them to, now we're angry. And going back to forgiveness, we no longer have that inner peace. And that's where forgiveness comes in. Forgiveness, as stated before, one of the purposes of forgiveness is to restore that inner peace, right? It is important to make sure that when we think about forgiveness, the first thing that we think about, especially if we go back to that simple example I just gave, is that we're not condoning or excusing someone else's behavior. Me deciding that I am not going to allow someone else's actions to control my emotions, right? As difficult as that could be, especially if your situation that you're struggling with as it relates to anger is not as simple as that. It may not be as black and white as that. It could be something a lot more personal, a lot more tragic. But the first thing that we have to think about as it comes down to forgiveness is that it is truly a personal decision that we are making to release anger, release resentment, and any negative emotions that is associated with that particular item, whether it is something someone did, something someone said. We are choosing to release ourselves of that particular item. It is so important that we do that, because when we decide that as humans, we're going to embrace empathy, we're going to embrace compassion, and we're going to just have a strong rooted desire to heal ourselves internally and to really help. And we have a desire to help and to heal others as well. Sometimes I say others because depending on your situation, some people may be seeking your forgiveness, and your forgiveness could be the key for them to feel like, okay, I can breathe about this situation. I did this person wrong. I feel so bad, and they won't forgive me. Do not use your forgiveness as a way to hold someone else hostage. Now, it is an entirely different podcast episode to kind of walk through why your forgiveness is being held as the master key to them being able to kind of let go. But that again is a different podcast. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it is important to know that forgiveness helps us heal ourselves, and it also helps us heal others. So I would just encourage you to really take time to reflect about some of the things that have happened in your past, right? Some of the grudges that you may be holding on to. And I don't want you to think that I'm telling you to go back in your past and dig some things up. But let me tell you, as humans, when you think throughout the day, we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Of those thoughts, if you find that you are naturally coming back to your spouse left the toilet seat up, or your kids didn't clean their room, or whatever you are holding on to that just naturally comes back to your mind, that is a grudge. That is something that consciously or unconsciously you are holding on to. And I would encourage you to write that down. Once you write that thing down, make sure that you make a decision to also write down the negative emotions that you associate with that. And for forgiveness, similar to our earlier episode around anger, don't just say that you're going to forgive them because it made you angry. What did it really make you feel? Were you disappointed in the fact that your children didn't clean up their room after you asked them? Were you hurt that your spouse said what they said to you? I would encourage you to, again, kind of Google an anger iceberg and try to dig beneath the surface of that iceberg. Try to understand, what other emotions am I feeling? Am I really feeling outside of just saying that I was angry and I'm going to just choose to forgive this person? When we say that we're angry, anger and saying that you're mad or you're pissed at someone, that is really like pressing the easy button in the situation, right? It is not like being able to say, you know what, I am upset because what you said hurt me, or it just simply made me feel like I couldn't trust you, right? Dig deeper into your emotions to really begin to explore, how are you truly feeling, and be able to express those emotions. When you are forgiving someone, there is a level of vulnerability that comes out of authentic forgiveness. So it is important to make sure that we're not afraid to truly express ourselves and truly express how we're feeling as it relates to forgiveness. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So the next thing that we're going to dive into as it relates to forgiveness is how we can begin to cultivate forgiveness consistently in our daily routine. This is really where consistency comes into play. Forgiveness is not something that we're going to one and done, because if you've lived on this planet for any length of time, people will always find a way to do something that irritates you, that gets on your nerves, that just gets you off of that inner peace, right? I think is the easiest way to put that. So, what do we do to cultivate forgiveness as something that we're going to strive to do every single day? Just as we engage in taking care of our physical health, just as we engage in making sure that we're eating the correct things from a dietary perspective every single day, we want to make sure that we are establishing those habits of nurturing our emotional well-being as well. We have to make it a commitment to let go of anything that happens, especially if you can say, in my example that I gave earlier, the trash bag incident, while it was an annoyance, it wasn't something that I should have let ruin my Monday or ruin my Tuesday or ruin my morning. Like, when you begin to really look at the things you're complaining about in the grand scheme of your day, like, is this really something that I need to continue to harbor or continue to hold on to? When we think about how we can cultivate forgiveness in our lives, I think, and I'm sure you guys have all heard it before, positive gratitude, positive affirmations, whether you have an affirmation on your bathroom window, whether you have an entire gratitude journal, being able to express the positive aspects in your life really allows you to shift your focus towards that present moment and really helps you stay grounded in what really matters, right? If you are more on the affirmation side of things, you may say, I choose to forgive and let go, or I am creating a future filled with love and understanding, right? Affirmations are great to help you, strengthen your ability to consistently forgive. If you are a person of gratitude, which, while I don't personally have a gratitude journal, for some reason, journaling is a habit that I've been trying to pick up on a more consistent basis, but I always find that I do tend to struggle in that area, being consistent and writing things down. But I do find that when I journal on a consistent basis, which I try to force myself to do, the results are outstanding. From a gratitude perspective, I make it a habit to think and to say things I'm grateful for very often throughout the day. Whether I'm walking and I'm like, man, I'm grateful that I can use my feet today, or I'm grateful for the food I was able to afford today. Just being grateful for smaller things allows you to have a softer heart by nature. And when something challenging or annoying or frustrating does come your way, you're already in a soft position, versus if you were already angry, already wound up about something, and then this other thing happens, it's likely that you're going to be tipped over the edge compared to if you were already consistently practicing being soft and practicing gratitude on a daily basis already. I guess one thing I personally found very interesting as it related to, your physical health and forgiveness. Forgiveness is truly a thing, or an act rather, that if you do it consistently, it will help you lower your stress levels. It'll help you lower your blood pressure, and it'll often make your immune system stronger, right? Because you are practicing forgiveness on a consistent basis. You are allowing yourself to improve your overall well-being, right? And we know that once something messes with your stress, the way your brain, the way your body is wired, once your stress levels get out of control, everything else, unfortunately, associated with your well-being will ultimately take a fall. Because as humans, for the current society that we live in, our bodies weren't meant to live in such a high stress state, but we often live in a high stress state day in and day out. Whether we think about going to work and we're stressed at work, it sometimes could even start before work. If you have a stressful home life, then you get in a car and you're stressed and you have road rage. Then you get in the office and you feel like the people you work with maybe aren't the most competent people. You go to lunch and the person that you bought your lunch from messes with your order. Like, it can just really be thing after thing after thing. And that ultimately could cause you to have higher stress levels. Well, forgiveness and being able to practice that on a consistent basis, as mentioned earlier, will really, really help your physical health. Ultimately, not even just your physical health, right? It all plays a role. Physical, mental, emotional well-being. It really increases your happiness level, helps reduce things like anxiety and depression, and really helps increase your overall self-esteem, because you're thinking positive thoughts, not just about yourself, but also about other people as well. You don't feel an emotional burden anymore as it relates to forgiveness, as it relates to other people. And what does that do, right? That means that when you constantly forgive other people and you're constantly not as uptight, quote unquote, if you, as you normally were, it's something that people who live in the same home with you, they will definitely be able to see the change in you easily. It'll make them want to be around you more, because you're not that person that, man, if I do one thing, this person's going to be upset, or they're going to yell, or it's going to just ruin everything, right? So those are just some of the benefits of making sure that when you think about why practicing forgiveness is important, we want to just make sure that we're doing it not just, again, for other people, but we're doing it for ourselves as well. And that really leads us well into our last major topic, which is forgiving yourself. Oh, man, this one is a doozy. It is so hard sometimes to forgive yourself. A lot of times as humans, we can carry guilt and blame for past mistakes, which ultimately just hinders our growth and happiness. But One thing that I've learned, and I can just give you guys a personal example, I've personally just blamed myself because if you listen to like the anger podcast that I did a few weeks ago, I struggled a lot with anger, and anger was really one of those things that I felt now. If I had gotten that under control a lot earlier in my life, there would have been some relationships I might have been able to save. There would have been some harm that I might not have caused, might have been some words I might not have stated, and not being able to really forgive myself for my lack of really overall, I'd say, emotional maturity, really took me a while to just really sit with myself. One, and understand God does not make any mistakes. And so you going through that, and in my mind, was something that took a lot longer for me to get better at. It was not a mistake. It was very, very intentional for me to be able to become the person that I am today, because while, yes, I've made some mistakes, looking back over life now, I can certainly connect the dots and say, well, if you didn't lose this while this situation was terrible, you certainly would not have gained X, Y, and Z, right? And so being able to consistently forgive yourself, whether you find that you think that you're a klutz and you constantly trip over things or you constantly fumble things, right? And people may know you as someone who is a klutzer who always messes something up. Listen, have forgiveness with yourself. Not forgiveness because of what other people say about you, but because you've heard those terms for so long, you've now ascribed to yourself what they've said about you. And you've merged someone else's identity or their way of viewing you to yourself as well. That is something you have to forgive yourself for. As humans, we are social creatures. And as much as we like to believe that other people's opinions don't matter to us, I'll say as humans, we have an easier time on a macro level of ignoring a stranger on social media than we do ignoring your aunt or your uncle or someone who you're related to, or a friend or someone that you know, right? It's a lot tougher to create a line between what they say versus how you really feel about it, especially if you haven't made a practice of creating that line of separation, right? If these people are important to you and they're speaking negativity into your life and you've accepted that and it's become your own identity of yourself, you have to make sure you forgive yourself and begin to have more compassion towards yourself, because all of that really helps you build a stronger self-esteem and really helps you continue down the path of personal growth. There's no way that you can be consistent if you think that you are an inconsistent person. If because you procrastinate a lot, so you think, man, I'm just a procrastinator, but you're trying to break that habit, right? It's those simple things, like those simple I am phrases, if you will, that allow you to really see how you view yourself. This is related slightly to forgiveness, but more so related to the I am statement. In this revelation just hit me this week as I was reading the word, when God, of course, is talking to Moses, and Moses asked God, who do I tell Pharaoh? When Pharaoh says, who sends me? Who do I say? And God says, I am, right? And so this week, I've been a lot more cautious of what phrase I say after I am, right? And just to give a very practical example, when you introduce yourself, you say, hi, my name is Rakia Collins, and I am a manager at X, Y, and Z, or I am a senior analyst at whatever your company may be. And it's interesting that we use the phrase I am as if your job title is really all that you are. And so for me, I say that as an example to say I have had to look at some of the I am phrases that I've been making and really say, is this true? And again, this is truly based on the fact that I am really big on diving into and associating myself in a positive light with God and with his laws and with his decrees. And if he said I am and he left it blank because he is, who am I to say I am and put a job title behind that, right? And even if you say something as simple as, I am angry or I am upset, like that is not what you are. That is a temporary emotion. So I've been more intentional about saying things like, current state, this emotion I'm feeling is X, right? And I know that for some of you guys, it's like, stop it. Like, just say I am. But for me, again, I want to be very cautious of what I say after I am, especially if I'm feeling something that is temporary, right? If I were to make an I am statement, I genuinely want it to be something that is applicable to my life in all aspects, such as, I am a purpose-driven woman, right? That is a fact. That is not something that any other human gave me. That is my self-identification of myself. So as you're thinking about things to forgive yourself for, being cognizant that you may need to forgive yourself of knowledge you didn't have, right? I've read the Bible. I'm sure we've all read or heard Moses and God and that interaction, whether we've gone to church or a Bible study or whatever. But it wasn't until this week that I've literally said to myself, I need to be more cognizant of what I say after I am, right? And working on forgiving myself for just, hey, you didn't know, right? You didn't know and you weren't in that level in your relationship and in your knowledge of the Creator. And because of that, forgive yourself and let it go. And for me, that process of self-forgiveness have gotten a lot easier because I practiced it in so many other areas of my life. And so I would encourage you, as you guys are thinking about where you may need to forgive yourself, really set aside some time for reflection, whether you have to reflect in your car because you may have a louder family home, like not loud as in the people are loud, but just people. You have 5 or 6 people living in your home, and so you want to really have a space to think. I would encourage you to go for a walk, journal, to listen to your music, like whatever it looks like for you to be in a space where you are truly self-reflecting, really thinking about forgiving yourself and acknowledging the lessons that you've learned from the things you've done in the past. Speak kindly to yourself. Be nice to yourself, right? Like you don't necessarily have to say things like, I am stupid or I am dumb. Like you have to be cognizant of what you are saying to yourself. Acknowledge yourself as someone who is worthy of forgiveness. The same way where we can forgive other people, you yourself are a being that is worthy of protection. You are worthy of having the same level of forgiveness that you want to extend to other people. So I know this podcast episode was probably a bit longer, but I do hope that you were able to listen to some principles and really gather a couple of action items from today's discussion, whether, you need to focus more on cultivating forgiveness as a daily practice, whether it's extending forgiveness to yourself or whatever you would need to do in order to make sure that every single day you are cultivating forgiveness in your everyday life is really the goal of today's podcast, making sure that we are consistent in our forgiveness of others and of ourselves. And of course, last but not least, this episode would not be complete if we did not end it with a verse from the best book in the world. Today's verse comes from Matthew chapter 6, verse 14 through 15. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others of their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. I think given our topic today, we know that these words were said by Jesus. We know, just given what we've discussed today, how relevant that phrase, that verse is, the ability to be able to forgive others just as we want God to forgive us. So I will speak to you guys on next week's episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of The Key to Consistency. Wherever you are listening to this podcast, it would mean everything to me if you could rate it, review it, reach out to me on Instagram. Would love your feedback, would love to hear anything you like, anything you don't like. Please feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit from it. And until next time, Bye, guys.